And a 5, and a 4, and a 3, and a 2. Hello. Good morning, everybody. Let me just pop out the chat. Or good evening, or good afternoon. I think it's mostly either morning or evening. Cheese! I've got myself a double cream brie today. No mead today because I actually partook of a hefty amount of mead last night. Decided to have a day off. I do occasionally take days off. Not as many as people would think. There we go. Very innocent looking brie. Nom nom nom. Hello! Hey Don. Alan, Amigo. Gas Duke, Eric. Moonring. Moist Nurglite Lover. Jand, Josh, Ian. William, nice to see you. Fighter level 10, hello. Yes, cheese. Indeed, cheese. Tenosid, Christopher. No, actually I have had some sleep. I've just been up quite early. I managed to catch Arthur Gadawa on his stream, and I watched Sir Lucian and Jordan on their stream as well. But today, by popular request, we're going to be talking about Icewind Dale. So if you have any questions about Icewind Dale, this is the time to ask them, because I know an awful lot about Icewind Dale. I'm more familiar with Icewind Dale than any other area of the realms. And I had the privilege of helping Took Games research Icewind Dale for their upcoming Dark Alliance game. So those of you who are not aware of that, I actually did some work as a sort of side hustle for Wizards of the Coast and Took Games. The PH is silent, that's right. So I know about some secret things about Icewind Dale. Abracadabra? What has become of Clan Battlehammer? So Clan Battlehammer, if you... the interesting thing is that this Icewind Dale game, the video game that's coming out, will be set quite far back in the time period of the Crystal Shard by R.A. Salvatore. So this was read cover to cover several times by me researching Kryn Shinabon and yeah, all that. And the 10 Towns and the invasion of the 10 Towns. In answer to somebody else's question, Drizzt is actually statted out in the Hall of Heroes book, as well as Bruenor Battlehammer. Let's see, and Elminster. So he's on page 19 to 22. There he is. Drizzt Do'Urden. He is a ranger, obviously. 10th level Elven Ranger. I've seen him in other places as a cross-class fighter ranger, but he's actually straight-up ranger in this. And we've got a couple of pages of him. And that's him and Guinevere. Guinevere shown quite a lot smaller. In this, more like a giant cat. And his scimitars are very curved in this one. Yeah. And without the traditional sort of Yeti pelt ruff around the outside of his cloak. So yeah. But he dwells in Icewind Dale. Is the crystal shard drow free? No. Does he have any divine powers? Drizzt? No. Are the barbarian tribes in any way involved with the leaders of the Ten Towns? Back in the time period of the Dark Alliance game, the Rigged Barbarians have had their initial invasion. So anywhere where Wulfgar appears as an adult, essentially, is post the Ten Towns invasion of the Rigged Barbarians. So that's the tribe of the Elk and the various other tribes. The Rigged Barbarians are, their culture's like 6,000 years older than the Uthgard Barbarians. The Uthgard Barbarians are a combination of Northmen and the refugees from Netheril, who basically combined to form tribes and things like that. The Rigged Barbarians have been there for much longer, a much earlier invasion wave of the Northmen. What's the secret quest to get the OP item? I imagine you're probably going to unlock some pretty cool things when you kill big name creatures that Drizzt and Wulfgar have fought in the past. So icing death, for instance. Yeah, mead is a great drink. So what we're seeing on the cover of the book is a aspect of Auril. Auril is a goddess of cold. She's quite primordial, and her followers do things like they need to go out and almost freeze to death, or they need to freeze an animal to death or cause it to die of exposure as a form of worship to Auril. But Auril's got a secret thing going on where her followers are actually creating roads because she wants to. I'm not sure why. It's kind of become a goddess of travel through the northern wilderness as well. Passage through frozen terrain being seasonal, and the person who can get in first with trade items or get out last, for instance, is very important to trade and travel. So it's interesting. So most of the people who would pray to Auril would be people who are heading out into blizzards and cold environments and stuff, and they don't want to get caught in mountain passes and stuff. So they're praying for a safe passage through winter. But she's a cruel goddess. Well, yeah, you could say he's got the favour of Maliki a little bit. But it only comes up occasionally in his stories. Auril isn't the queen. No, she's not the queen of the Unseelie Fae Court. She probably would have a comfortable position in the Unseelie Court. But don't forget that the Unseelie Court isn't necessarily the evil side of the Fae Court. It's just the ugly and vicious, more sort of side of fairy tales. There's good creatures and bad creatures in fairy tales, or ugly creatures that are sometimes misunderstood. What specific interesting locations can be found in Ten Towns? So the Ten Towns all have a different feel, a different vibe. Bryn Shander, of course, is the main hub, and it's kind of become the capital. And it's interesting because that's the one that's not located right next to a lake. The 10 towns are set up around the lakes to get access to the knucklehead trout, which is the main source of income for the 10 towns. So they're all fishing villages, essentially. They form a kind of a mutual trade pact, and they have an alliance of the lords of each town sort of meet in Bryn Shander, and Regis is part of that as well. He's one of the representatives of the 10 towns. So Bryn Shander is pretty much where you're going to be based if you're in the 10 towns, and that's the metropolitan hub. It's a walled town on a hill in a largely flat terrain. The main sort of elevation is Kelvin's Cairn. Kelvin's Cairn is really interesting because it's not like a mountain. It's an edifice that was created through an event which happened in the past. There's a big sort of runnel in the ground because it's a well, I don't want to give away too much information, but it's basically a crash-landed cloud palace, which has got a massive amount of boulders piled on top of it because a god rained unearthly destruction down on it. So it's literally a gravesite, but it's also one hell of an interesting dungeon if you get inside there. So the dwarves that the clan Battlehammer were mining around and underneath that area, but they weren't mining underneath Kelvin's Cairn itself. They were mining around the sort of the flat land in that valley, that runnel and stuff, and getting lots of iron deposits. Not particularly rich iron deposits. They're hard working, obviously. So they were building a lot of things that people in the Arctic areas need, like hinges and nails and all that sort of stuff. There is another area which isn't really talked about very much, which is a town on the way to Icewind Dale, which is very forbidden and people can't go in there and stuff. And there's a like a duchy sort of towards the coast as well, which is really out of the way, and has a little lord's family, and that comes up later on in R.A. Salvador's novels, sort of tacked in there. But obviously Kelvin's Cairn is the most interesting area to see. And, of course, the Ice Sea, the Sea of Moving Ice, the pack ice and stuff, where the Rigid barbarians are forbidden to go. It's taboo for them to go out on there because it's so dangerous. What sort of relationship is there between Ten Towns and Hartsvale? It's a huge trek to get to Hartsvale from there, because we're talking like the Great Glacier and over the top of the Anrock. So to go through the north there, you'd either have to go through the Spine of the World Mountains or go into the Silver Marches and go through some areas which essentially Drizzt and the companions of the Hall went through, almost got killed by trolls, got a lot of magical assistance along the way, got severely turned away from some cities there, and you have to go all the way over to like the top of the Anrock and stuff. So it's a very very long trek. We're talking weeks and weeks, months even. And so you'd have a very limited time period in the year where you could do that. How do you think the book will have suggestions for adapting the module to other settings as early books did leave? So this one, I think, is going to have a lot of different parts to it that you can drop in. I'm not entirely sure whether it's going to have a sort of a railroaded storyline or it's going to have lots of different story arcs and stuff that you can put in there. Chris Perkins was involved with the writing of this, and he did the Cholt book, and obviously Cholt has got a lot of things that you can pick and choose, and you can approach the adventure from many different angles. Also, they've got a really impressive writing cast who have put together different parts of this, and they work together really to have lots of different themes and elements and help them each other out, and each part is informed by other bits and stuff. So I think it's going to be quite a grab bag, and there is a lot of monsters in this. It's so in regards to it as a resource, it's going to be like Volo's Guide or Mordenkainen's. It's got a lot of Arctic monsters and stuff in there. It's almost like an addition to the monster manual, which we've been wanting, obviously. But yeah, in order to make it a really interesting environment, it has to have a lot of ecology, because otherwise it's just you against the elements. But you got to bear in mind that it's as heavily populated by other creatures who are beyond civilization, and it's the border of the lands of the orcs. So the orcs are in the Frozenfar, beyond the glaciers and things like that. The orcs live in this environment, and the Spine of the World Mountains is, they're heavily populated area where they live. So that's where they hang out most of the time, in their burrows and holes and caverns and caves, fighting amongst themselves and building up their population until it gets too much for their resources and they need to head down south and raid the lands of the civilized people. Yeah, the Scrimshaw. Yeah, that's right. How far along the Drizzt Chronicles are you? I haven't read I haven't read the prologue ones, but I've read everything else up until the end of that series. Structured like an Essentials kit, yeah. What cold monsters are most excited to see back in 5th edition? I'm interested to see what they do with the Verbeeg. I'm 100% sure that the Verbeeg are going to be in this as well, because the Verbeeg and crag cats and things like that live around Icewind Dale and particularly Kelvin's Cairn and the foothills of the mountains. We're going to see an ice chewinga version of the Chult chewinga. We're going to see elemental type creatures. We're going to see the Goliath, and the 5th edition view of the Goliath is going to be more advanced, I think, and very interesting. We're going to see there's the people who were there before anybody else. So that's the worshippers of Ulutiu, basically the Inuit people who live in the far north. And we're going to see there's other monstrous humanoid races that live on the Sea of Frozen Ice, who are kind of like they're not yetis. They're just sort of an Arctic humanoid species that are not related to anything else. We'll see white dragons. We'll see obviously remoras and other sort of things, Arctic creatures, maybe some dire bears and things. And probably a lot of information about Rothe. Rothe are extremely important to the Icewind Dales. They're kind of like the reindeer of the region. Snow trolls and chillborn zombies, yep, whites, things like that. What is my favourite lore in this campaign book? I think if any of the lore that I came up with for the game is in there, I'll be very interested in that, obviously. It'll be really great. I think this is going to come out after the video game. So after Dark Alliance comes out, this will come out. So I think the Dark Alliance game is going to be released just before this is publicly released, I'm thinking. Have I read Timeless? I don't know. How big is the creature? It's very big. Yeah, Verbeegs are interesting because they're kind of the border between big humans and hill giants. So they're the middle ground between that. So they're like they're not as stupid as ogres. They are giants, so they're true-blooded giants, but they are the most human-like out of the giants, and they're very wily and tricky and nasty, quite nasty, and bullies. And also they're thieves. So yeah, they're not very nice people. Rothe are like cattle. Yep. So Rothe are basically yaks, essentially. Do I think of Mulhorand and that area campaign setting in 5e? Yeah, I don't know if there's anything for that yet. Will there be any suggestions for settings that are not Forgotten Realms, like adventure books about the... Oh, well, Eberron's getting a major campaign book by Keith Baker independently of Wizards of the Coast. So it's not being published as a Wizards of the Coast hardbound, but it will be available on DM's Guild and things like that. And that's a huge book. It's like many, many, many pages. So if you're an Eberron fan, it's very good news for you. Oh, I'll definitely read those books for sure. I just haven't... I mean, I forked out a lot of money on those books. There's a lot of them. That's a lot of books to get through. Took me a while. That owl-looking thing on the cover art is an aspect of Auril. So it's a demigod, essentially. September the 15th on D&D Beyond, so that's quite a ways away. Will be a Grog Frost variant. Well, yeah, basically. So, I mean, if the Goliath living in, high alpine regions, 11,000 feet and, above sea level sort of thing, you got to be cold resistant to live up there. You also got to have massive lung capacity to deal with like low amounts of oxygen in the air. So the Goliath are mountaintop living people, and they have their origin and how much giant blood they've got in them is kind of left mysterious. They're essentially half giants, right? Because we don't really have a half giant race outside of like Dark Sun, for instance. That's one of the things I liked most about Dark Sun was half giants. Like that was the thing that compelled me to read Dark Sun stuff. So I think a half giant player character race is really cool, and ties in with those storylines quite well. Oh no, you haven't got any bottles of mead left. So yeah, Auril, the goddess Auril, is obviously getting involved in this. No, I think no. I know what you're talking about, Dracos. It's not blue milk. No. How do I think yak folk think about Rothe? Exactly the same way that we would think of, like, gorillas, essentially, or even less. I don't know. Like, what do you think about one of those little itty bitty monkeys? I don't know. It's probably an aspect, well, it's tricky. I don't know. I don't know whether it's an avatar or an aspect. Probably an aspect. So Verbeeg, they bully ogres and hill giants into doing what they want them to do. Even though the Verbeeg are smaller than those giants, the giants are bullied by the Verbeeg because the Verbeeg are smarter. So they're one of the few giant races that actually rely on their intelligence to get ahead. And their status in the ordning is based on essentially how domineering and bullying and tyrannical they can be. So they will double cross you. They'll break their word and stuff, and that's seen as just normal tricky behavior that's regarded as clever in their society. The year in the Dales right now is, well, I mean, the rest of the Forgotten Realms, it's about 1492 or 93 at the moment. But this adventure is actually set in the past. It's set after the events of the Wars of the Ten Towns. I think it's set after the Crystal Shard. The video game will be set in the era of the Crystal Shard. I can guarantee you that. And this adventure is set after that era. So it's probably when the most of the people have returned to the Icewind Dale from Mithril Hall. Because the Reged barbarians travelled to Mithril Hall and set up a town outside of Mithril Hall. So, Capuchin Monkey, thank you. Oh yeah, the Mongrel folk. The Mongrel folk are definitely problematic, right? So, what would I give them as a name? I'd call them the hybrid people or something like that. I don't know. I think calling them infiltrators would be fine, because that's the origin of their species was a wizard trying to create a race called the infiltrators, and the infiltrators essentially were able, like Kroot or Gene Stealers, able to eat the DNA of another creature and assume that creature's form by copying the DNA and bonding with it, essentially becoming a part of them. That mechanism, however, didn't breed true, and the result was when the mongrel folk people eat the meat of other creatures, they combine that DNA with themselves and become their offspring. Become essentially a mismatch of different parts of creatures that the thing. So they've got bits of crab and things like that. But the original origin story of it was basically what's the result of in D&D, where the DNA is definitely very plastic, and you get all these outlandish combinations of different species, which as a biologist I can tell you just wouldn't work. The logical conclusion of that is, well, what if there is a lot of crossbreeding between different races? What could you end up with? And the idea of the mongrel folk was kind of like that thing. But I like the way that the law has sort of has changed and become more of a story of the hardships of people who are the victims of magical experimentation, essentially. So it's also echoed in the Githyanki and Githzerai, for instance, who came out of bondage and slavery from the Mind Flayers, for instance. So you got this. It's more raw for them because they're still in captivity and subjected to abuse and prejudice from other people. So it's a way to insert those elements into your story. So I think calling them infiltrators would be an homage to what they were or what they're trying to aspire to become, because they really want to be full doppelgangers and shapeshifters. So I could see them deliberately getting themselves infected with lycanthropy, for instance, and just being a hybrid form of lycanthrope all the time, or just returning to a beast shape, or learning wizard spells of polymorph, or becoming invisible all the time. So essentially becoming like skulks or something like that. So yeah, they're in a state in their relationship with the world where they're sort of resigned to their fate of being this people, but have the potential to be so much more. Also, just the story elements that you could have, like what if you've got a group of them who are deliberately ingesting giant flesh, for instance, and trying to become a dominant race that is breeding progressively more powerful DNA into their offspring. So you get the sect of increasingly massive and powerful mongrel folk who actually start to dominate people, you know. Because don't forget, some of them are worshipping one of the goblin gods, and where the goblin gods are, Maglubliet is a part of his dominating the goblin pantheon. So there's a chance that they could actually be, their worship could be subsumed by Maglubliet, and yeah, the potential. And if hobgoblins get hold of them and realize that they can breed essentially whatever living war beasts they want out of them, they could breed out the intelligence from them, for instance, and turn them into monstrous machines of war. So if you can look past the problematic nature of what they are and see the story potential of what they can be and their struggles against the abuse of this gift they have for genetic absorption, I think you can run some really good stories that way. But obviously, they're open to abuse from people who are only interested in that facet of their nature, being a combination of different species. And I think it's short-sighted to write them off just as being problematic, put them to the side sort of thing. And the name doesn't really help, so yeah. Yeah. Chimeroids? Yeah, chimeroids would be a pretty good name for them, I suppose. It is really good cover art, yeah, for the book. Yeah, so the origin stories of the mongrel men, for instance, goes right back, and the original Curse of Strahd book. So I don't think they were included in Curse of Strahd this time around, were they? Were they? Are they in the Curse of Strahd? The most recent one? Yeah, your children are what you eat. Yeah. That's like somebody saying, "Oh, so they're vegans now?" It's like, well, if what you ate determined what your children looked like, then yeah, you'd be probably a vegan too. Exactly. Yeah, snacking on owlbears. Well, Morgan, it could be, extremely powerful. Yeah, so the Pathfinder has got a more interesting take on them, I think, as being the remnants of a human civilization that were exposed to magical energies due to a post-apocalyptic survival that they had. So they went underground and essentially got mutated, which is great. That's kind of like the Morlocks of Pathfinder. So if you wanted to run them that way, that's perfectly fine. More Ravenloft. Yeah, everybody's after Ravenloft. So the Gith, have they time travelled? I don't know. The problem with races that are completely subjugated by somebody else is their history is essentially erased, and we don't know whether the Mind Flayers have sort of kickstarted a new timeline and bootstrapped themselves into existence, in which case did they do that along with the Gith as a captive species? We don't know. I like the idea that the Gith are actually a progenitor race of humans and elves and things. I quite like that idea. That humans were around for such a long time earlier in history because they're actually from the Githyanki or the Githzerai. Gastrocorpi? The game developer and test footage is over on GameSpot YouTube channel. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, no, the Rothe definitely do appear on the surface world as much as they appear underground. Yeah, the Wolfgars people follow the elk, reindeer. Yeah. The dwarves, of course, subsist on Rothe as well. Modern junk food. I guess that there must be some sort of safeguard against them essentially turning into Rothe. It seems to be humanoids DNA that they copy the most. So they have insectoid parts because they've got bits of etacap or thrycreen, that sort of thing. Aranias. Wouldn't the Illithid record this history of their servants for scientific purposes? Probably, but they would do it mentally. They wouldn't have to write it down. Also, their writing is really weird. Any plans on doing Creatures of the Seas? Yeah. A werebeast army. A plague of werefolk. Really, a plague of lycanthropes is more likely than a plague of zombies in D&D. Was I ever into the choice? Oh yeah, choose your own adventure books. Yeah, that was what got me into buying D&D Basic in the first place. Was the choose your own adventure books. Warlock of Firetop Mountain, I think was my first one. Would it be lore friendly with the Gith using a laser gun? Yep, they're in the Dungeon Master's Guide. You can use them. No, quite a few creatures don't have resistance to cold, particularly humanoids. Obviously, it's not going to work against remorses and things like that, and giants and things. I mean, even like frost giants have got resistance to cold, obviously, but other giant races don't. So that and radiant damage. Very few things have got resistance to radiant damage or cold, really. Can't go wrong with Fireball. I wonder if there will be any alien-like or aberrant creature encounters. Yeah, because there has been mention of the thing a few times. So, yeah. I don't know. What sort of thing? The Oblex is a very thing-like creature. Some sort of a shape-shifting ooze would be really cool. They can just manifest copies of things, like a more mobile deep spawn. Was it actually confirmed the book was set in the past? Yeah, it's like 1450 DR. Yeah, that's also quite likely as well, William. So it could be either way. Like they could be a polyhybrid of the races that is the end result of all the crossbreeding between the different species, then taken back to the past and diverging again into the different species that would eventually become them. So that'll be an interesting take. We don't know. Gertie Odell, Gertie is part of Hartsvale, and she's quite far away from Icewind Dale, so she doesn't really have anything to do with it. Back at the time of Kelvin, though, Kelvin was basically he dominated the Frozenfar, so he conquered all of those different. He was a very dominant frost giant. What's my favourite type of environment? Snowy, desert, jungle, etc. For adventuring? Probably jungle. Jungle forest. Dense forest. I also like rocky badlands as well. Like when the Fellowship of the Ring is running away from the orcs on wargs. That's my favourite sort of terrain, with broken rocks and tundra and caves and things all over the place. Weird cheese. Yeah, illithids have got a type of text which is it's almost like this Polynesian text that was on Rapa Nui, Easter Island. Thanks, Kikas Duke. By the way, reminder everybody that this is actually a monetized super chat, if you feel inclined. I know I got anybody who donated on Wednesday, don't worry. Gith hero character defeats a Mind Flayer overlord to retrieve a time-traveling device which helps end the enslavement of his race. Start a quest. Go. Yeah. Hey, Drenith. What do I think of the Runeterra Bilgewater stuff? I don't know. Runeterra. Oh, like the card game thing. I don't know. I kind of got it out of. I've got it back into playing Magic the Gathering, and I was like invested in their Magic the Gathering arena, and then I just sort of another set came out, and I was just kind of over it. I ended up like putting too much money into it. I was just like, yeah, this is bad. It's taking up too much of my time. It's fun, but yeah. Also, they have the perfect opportunity. I'm going to have some more cheese. They have a perfect opportunity in Arena with their cutscenes and stuff like that, and they could have it integrated with videos and things with the card releases, and really talk about the lore and the story and explain it and stuff, and have celebrities coming on and telling stories and stuff about, you know, the world of Dominaria and all that sort of stuff, the past and the history of things. Like if you click on a card, it could have links to videos and wiki articles and stuff about the characters on the cards and things, and more information about the card illustrators and things like that. So I think there's too much of an emphasis on the gameplay and the monetization of Magic the Gathering Arena, and not enough focus on the opportunity that Hasbro has to combine their IP and turn it into a role-playing and card gaming hybrid, which they're sort of dipping their toe into the water of because they're chicken shits and they are scared about combining the different aspects of the hobby because they think that Magic the Gathering players are too toxic. Essentially, they're shitting all over their fans in one way and kind of imposing on another fandom which is more accepting of new ideas. So it's slightly controversial attitude of mine, but I think they're missing an opportunity because they're just not willing to take the dive into it and actually combine the IP. I don't know if we're going to get any class variants in the book. Kelvin, yeah, I know. Well, Kelvin got so powerful and uppity that Tempest came down and challenged him. And you don't fight Tempest and win. And Tempest essentially smashed his mobile fortress to the ground and rained 5 meteors down on it. Right? Now, if that's in the game, that's me. That's my contribution to Forgotten Realms lore. That's it. So it's possible to go adventuring and find upside down giant ruins. What was the best campaign that I ran? I think probably the one with there was a lot of dimensional travel. We returned to the city that was on the verge of getting invaded. It was a homebrew world. And it really discussed the origin of this little mechanical creature called Tink. Yeah, mutant humans or proto-humans, we don't know. Exactly, Sam. In Dungeons and Dragons, you got to be wary of assuming that the mythology of a religion of a people is actually the course of events, that things that happened. So talking about gods creating this or gods creating that, there may have actually been an evolution. There may have actually been some events in the past which have been swallowed up by history being written by scholars and things like that of churches and faiths. So they write the history books, and so they put their beliefs in there. So a prime example of that is the Duergar and the Dero. The Dero is a perfect example. So if you want a perfect example of that in the lore and where I'm discussing that, go and watch the videos on the Dero and the Duergar, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. So the Dero have got different origin stories depending on who you ask, and the actual origin of them is off-world. So it's not actually on the world of Toril at all. Beholder blood. Oh yeah, for sure. White dragons, yeah. Um, so in Dark Alliance, you're definitely going to be fighting white dragons. You're definitely going to be fighting frost giants. I know that for sure. You're definitely going to be. You won't be fighting crag cats, and I don't know how heavily involved yetis are going to be in it at all. But there won't be crag cats. I'm not sure you're going to be fighting yetis, but you're certainly going to be fighting a crap load of goblins and orcs. Heaps of goblins. Well, Gond hasn't said that gunpowder shouldn't work anymore. Well, Gond has Gond has got some plans, right? He's got some sneaky. The Gondites have got they've got faith, and they've got their secular plans, which is discussed in this one here. Actually, I'll read it out to you. It's quite interesting. Talking about the Gondite religion. I love the religion of Lathander, by the way. It's hilarious. So the official creed of the Wonderbringer is encourage innovation and the invention of new tools, mechanics, and gadgets. Procure and record every tool. So they make copies of every type of technology that they find to preserve them. And while they work alongside wizards and clerics and things like that, and kind of prop them up and say, well, yeah, alchemy's great, they actually are quite wary of magic users, and magic users assuming that magic can do things that technology can also do. So according to the Gondites, they would actually prefer technology to take over magic. Anyway, assist inventors and those who are inventing new things. If rulers or scoundrels seek to harm or capture those inventors and sellers of inventions, to destroy or seize their works, then they must defend them, free them, and liberate their works. Copy everything so that nothing can be irretrievably lost. Show mechanical devices working to everyone, so they show off their new inventions. So they would have street fairs and carnivals and things like that where they would show clockwork wonders. So they would have markets and fairs and things where they're almost like an amusement park of technology. That includes fireworks shows and showing off smoke powder to people. When clergy or mages oppose you, cooperate rather than confront, and make common cause rather than enemies. But their secular aims, they have both a public creed and a secret creed. Influence or control every ruler possible. So the works of Gond can be embraced by and forced on, if needed, anyone and everyone. Smashing guilds and others who won't champion Gond's cause. So they will work against blacksmiths who are like, oh no, this is the way we do it, and we've always done it this way. And the Gondites will be like, well, what about our new machine press, and what about this production line technology we've got? And the guild of blacksmiths in town will be like, oh no, we don't want that sort of thing, and then they just disappear. Hey, thank you. Sidetrack, apologies, Spelljammer. Does the Phlogiston block the visual or celestial bodies, or is it more like the black between celestial bodies? Yeah, it's more like there's floating artifacts in the Phlogiston, and there's shattered crystal spheres and things like that, and there's creatures and things which are sort of floating around in the Phlogiston, but there's no planets or stars and things sort of floating freely in there. It'd be more like if a planet's sun has disappeared and then it becomes a rogue planet just floating through space. That's kind of what it's like in the Phlogiston. Occasionally you'll come across a rogue planet or something, and the ship will slow down because it's close to a gravity source. But otherwise, all of the stars and planets and stuff are restricted to being inside crystal spheres. Oh yeah, there is a method of freeing Tharizdun. There's the keys to his prison are locked up in these like 100 different magical gems that are scattered throughout everywhere. So it's really, really difficult. Yeah, exactly. The Gondite Church is basically a Renaissance Stark Expo. Yeah. Ulitiu he's withdrawn from the world of Forgotten Realms. His artifact necklace got withdrawn from the sea, so the Great Glacier is actually retreating, because that was artificially created by a magical item, an artifact. And essentially he just withdrew from the world. His sleeping form was getting its power drained off by Oral, so Oral was drawing a lot of power from Ulitiu and essentially assuming his roles and things as, yeah. And I don't think Ulitiu is really interested in coming back to the Forgotten Realms, to be honest. But if it came down to an actual fight between Ulitiu and Oral, I don't know. I don't know who would win out of those two. Oral certainly more willing to do the dirty deeds, I think. So she would think nothing of killing off all of his people. So perhaps Ulutiu would not be interested in that. He wouldn't want to see the Ulutiu people killed. I think Vector is an actual god. A Lich Pantheon. Wow. Yeah, that's essentially right. Yeah, Gondites are interested in an industrial revolution. Look at Lantern. It's becoming exceedingly wealthy, and Lantern's influence over the kingdoms of the Forgotten Realms, thanks to them producing shield golems, is huge. So they're essentially producing military hardware. So it's like they go to Waterdeep and say, hey, look, we will give you, for a discount price, a bunch of shield guardians to put down riots and things like that happen in the city under the control of the Watch, in concession for some trade tariff reductions and things like that, so that we can bring in, other products and stuff. Lean on these guilds here who are restricting our trade in paint pigments and things like that, and, that sort of thing. And so the Masks Lords will be like, I can get extremely wealthy. Oh, is it 333 gems? Okay. Yeah, so Frostburn, I haven't got it here. Frostburn was the 3.5 edition source book for cold environments. Equally valid now as it was then. No problem, Scott. Thank you, Outcast of the 30/40k. Malal Prophet, greatly appreciate you. Believe in malice because Malal believes in you. Vote Renegade in 42k together. Make chaos great again. I have no idea what you're talking about. Malar? Malar? Not Malal? Controversial question, Adam. Okay. Let me read it first. Oh, the changes. Yeah. So their diversity and race comment. So my opinion is pretty ho-hum, really. Back in the original D&D, for instance, if you wanted to play an elf or a dwarf, that was also your character class. It's like, what do you do? Well, I'm a dwarf. Yeah, but what's your character class? Dwarf. It's like all dwarves are the same. So they've moved away from that, and they've been moving away from that gradually. I think getting rid of the attributes, bonuses and stuff, or restrictions for a race is also a no-brainer. It's just a further, getting away from that and talking about their background as a culture, as a history, as a heritage and things, not a genetic, restriction or whatever. Like all things are this, So your attributes and things should be entirely variable, because you're going to have like sickly, weak orcs, and you're going to have super smart goblins and things like that. It's just, humans have got incredible variety in their stats and feat bonuses and things like that. So, and really, they're not. How greatly different than goblins and orcs and stuff are they really, and even elves? So yeah, I've got no problem with that. As to drow and orcs, orcs have at least 4 different sub-races on the continent of Faerun alone. So you've got mountain orcs, who are more primitive and savage and survivalist, and look different than the Thayan orcs, who come from a different region, possibly even a different world, from the Orc-Gate Wars that happened in Thay. And a huge number of them came through. Along with that number of orcs that came through were orcs that were civilized and not actually savage and warlike, and they moved off into the east somewhere, fate unknown, but they travelled off. So, run by nasty shamans and stuff like that, there's actually a huge diversity in the culture and heritage of orcs. They come from a world with just as much diversity and stuff that we don't really know about. But I know from the lore, at least, that there should be a lot more diversity in the backgrounds of orcs, and those options should be available as player characters. Plus, of course, you've got the Skro, and the Skro are the kind of jokey reverse orcs where they're space orcs and stuff, but they're not in any way primitive, savage tribes people. They're quite different. So there's an incredible diversity in orcs, and we need to open up to the possibilities of playing those different options. With the Drow, for instance, the history of Dambrath is quite interesting, which is one of the nations which has got a majority of far more half Drow people than there are like the full-blooded Drow pretty much live below ground and interact with them. And although their government is run by the priesthood of Leviatha, it's still a matriarchal kingdom, you could say, matridom. But in the original population, it wasn't enforced that females ruled everything. They were just more capable and got the job because they were actually an egalitarian society. And later on, it became more enforced in their governance because women being in power for that long essentially just changed the rules. And the males became much more focused on military action and things like that. It's a long story, and it's a very interesting culture in Dambrath. So and also we've got the Drow from Darksun, for instance, are entirely different. The Drow from Eberron are entirely different. So we can't restrict it to just one group in a multiversal setting, is what I'm saying. Thanks, Kickass Duke. Give a quick glance to the premises of the more Snowpiercer. Oh yeah, movie Snowpiercer. I have watched the movie. I haven't watched the series. It gives a basic layout for a D&D campaign. How would you set up the PCs? By the way, video is fan. So I really like the idea of traveling through a moving artifact. That's quite cool. Or a dungeon that's actually on the move, like a demi-plane that's traveling is the TARDIS, for instance. The TARDIS has got like a huge number of rooms and layers and stuff like that going inside it, so it's almost like a dungeon world which has got an opening that can open to any different plane of existence. So that would be really cool. So the idea of traveling in Deep Amaskar, for instance. So if you imagine that you find the portal to Deep Amaskar somewhere under the mountains of the east, and you go in through that entrance and you entered into this demi-plane, which has got these demi-planes branching off it in all sorts of different directions, kind of like Diablo 2, where you go into the sort of arcane space with all the stairways and stuff. So each sort of area is an opening into somebody's personal playground, and it's been abandoned and moved on, and it's got like they build demi-planes like dungeon builders would build rooms, and then when you come out, and there's another portal which leads to another world, and they've actually opened up different portals and touched on different places, and it's become a Nexus dungeon world. So that's a cool idea. And of course, who knows what the society is like inside Deep Amaskar, or how stratified and weird it's become, because they've been essentially just shut away with their own culture, which is their own sort of family and hierarchy and stuff. So family feuds could become nationalities. Who knows? It's really weird. Thanks, William. Oh, Malal's a 40k god. I'm not familiar. Apologies, not what I meant. Does the Phlogiston obstruct view like clouds and is opaque in the foreground and surrounding environment, or is it transparent, only opaque in the background? Yes, it's largely transparent in the foreground, quite diffuse. It can have drifts and mists of thickened stuff though, because you can actually encounter quite thick areas of Phlogiston that are misty, like rainbow hues and things, and otherwise it's quite clear and open, because it can't be too dense because you'd essentially run into it like a fog bank. If you're traveling at enormous speed, it would actually be problematic, because it'll whip past you like a hurricane wind and actually knock stuff off and things if you're, yeah. So yeah, it's not like water droplets, which is what makes clouds and stuff in our world. So don't think of it as clouds. It is highly flammable though. So in that regard, it is kind of like misty gas and stuff, but it's quite diffuse, and yeah, it shows up like nebula in the background. So you're flying through nebulas, like Star Trek. If it needs to be misty, it is misty. Like if you're hiding in a nebula, if you're hiding in a Phlogiston flow to get away from another ship which is trying to find you, then it can be misty. And yeah, there are different bits in Star Trek where firing into this nebula would cause a chain reaction. That's exactly what it's like in the Phlogiston. Thanks, Michael. Hey, AJ, glad to hear you'll be part of the virtual panel for Law. Congrats. Question. Oh yeah, that's right. The block party next weekend. So there won't be a live stream here. I'll be doing the block party, which is happening earlier, about 2 or 3 hours earlier than this live stream time slot. So I'm going to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning here, and I'm going to be joined by Jordan and Ted and Mr. Rex. So it's going to be quite cool. And that will be the first time that me and Jordan have actually sat down and talked with Mr. X, because he's usually quite aloof and hard to get hold of. So quite a cadoos to Ted there, actually getting hold of him. So it's going to be awesome. Question. The Goliath race came out in the Races of Stone book 3.5. Are they giants, or do their skins have rock-like texture or normal skin? So it's normal skin that has sort of warty, hard, tough, leathery bits that look like stone. But they aren't actually. It's just they've got a tough hide, bits on their hide. So it's largely cosmetic. It doesn't actually increase armor class or anything like that. But yeah, the idea is that they don't. They're in the lowland regions. It would be very hot, humid for them all the time. Hey, thanks, Michael. Cheers. It's coffee, but cheers. Yeah, it's almost time for the stream to end. Is Vecna a demigod now, or not yet a full god? It's hard to say. Like, Lich, for powerful spellcasters and powerful beings, isn't a permanent state of affairs. They can actually get rezzed and become live again. That's one of the things that is quite freaky. Like Samaster, for instance, I think was a Lich at one point and became a flesh and blood person again. Or maybe Valsharoon, or one of them anyway. How do you play a drow character without being edgy or angsty? Essentially, the original path to that is being a worshipper of Illustray. So Illustray is a good drow goddess. They do have good gods in their pantheon. Elves are essentially self-interested people, but they're a product of their upbringing, their environment, and their background and stuff as well. And obviously, being a male in drow society, particularly if you have gone on surface raids and stuff like that and have seen the way that other cultures live and realize that all the males are in charge here, and they're not subject to the whims of and whip cracks of these horrible handmaidens of an evil goddess, the priestess that will sacrifice us if we don't perform. And we're not just chattel, I'm not just a hunk of meat. So I think it's more often the males that would leave drow society. But don't forget, the pressures of drow society also cause them to flee for their lives. So the females often leave drow society and are like, woof, I don't want to be any part of that because I'm going to get killed. I'm never going to get above the status that I am now. I'm never going to learn the arcane arts because they're just not teaching me, or it's too tied up with this religion which I don't agree with. I don't want to kill people, so it can be quite different. A midweek stream, maybe, depends on how I'm doing with the video production. Moonring, no, I'm still going to find out about that. Phlogiston is not like fluidic space, no, there's it's definitely different from normal space though. Very, very, very different. Will I ever do a video on spell scales? Yeah, I will. I swear. Gas space, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's going to be re-uploaded, obviously, but it would be really cool to have you there live, because I need the reassurance and people asking me questions and stuff like that. If you do have any questions that you want to ask me and Jordan and Mr. X, test our might. Put us to the test. Vecna was originally male. Now he's just, he's got a raisin. Sunlight sensitivity. So the items that Drow will bring up from the Underdark with him would quickly erode away in the sunlight. And they, of course, are highly adapted to living in darkness. With low light vision isn't being able to see everything in the dark. It's just being able to see a blurry sort of black and white image of things. In R.A. Salvador's book, infravision is heat vision, and a lot of old school D&D players think of night vision or dark vision as that, heat vision. And so a lot of their tactics and things like that involved concealing their heat signatures and things in the Underdark. Don't forget also that the Underdark is quite hot where they live. The further you go underground, the warmer it gets. Is there a system you like for exposure to cold? Yeah, basically the exhaustion level thing for that is perfectly fine. Exposure, got rules for that. We've got rules for that in 5th edition. Yeah, essentially, yeah. Chazarok, that's exactly what I would do as well. They come from a house which has fallen into disfavor. Most of the people that person knows and relies on as allies have been killed or assassinated, and they essentially need to flee to the surface. Much like if every town and down in the ground level was dangerous to you, you would escape into the mountains. Maybe go and live with the Goliath for a while. It's obviously they're going to have prejudice against you, but you could probably fit into their society. You're going to need to adapt, obviously, and you're going to have physical difficulty with the cold and the atmosphere. That's essentially the same for the Drow. The surface world is cold for them. They're not used to weather, rain, and things. It's bright all the time, so they need to protect their eyes and things. And obviously they have a lot of prejudice because of the actions of the other Dark Elves who have raided and killed the people on the surface world with impunity in the past. So it doesn't make you a bad person, but you are facing the prejudice of people against you, which is the interesting thing about playing a Drow. Anyway, that's it from me, everybody. Unless anybody has any other questions about Icewind Dale. Vecna was born human, yep. He had a mum. His mum was a servant of a student of a ancient serpent god, serpent primordial. Yeah, it's like 150 people in here today. Getting crazy. Sorry for all the questions that I've missed. I know there's probably people who have been repeating questions. You can always put questions in the comments. If I haven't got to your question in the live stream, put your question in the comments and I'll answer it. Because that's what I do. Isn't Vecna an exception to the rules of resurrection because he was born human? No. Hey, thanks, Kollros. Are you familiar with Firefly, the TV show? Yes. Browncoats represent. Would you make a D&D campaign of it, maybe for Tilt 5 supporters? Would yeah. I actually thought the background for Firefly was really sort of stark, undeveloped, and a little bit boring. It wouldn't make for an interesting enough D&D campaign. Because I really like the idea of planes hopping and going to really different exotic environments and stuff, and like the different planets and stuff they had there were a little bit bleh, and it all being run by like a mega corporation, bleh, you know. So apart from if you took away the actors from Firefly and you put some boring actors in there, it would be a very different TV series. Controversial, maybe. Children of the Dark Maiden make homes in trees like elves, or they make homes like drow in the Underdark. Yeah. Firefly died too soon because it was killed by the network being idiots. Sky Pony tribe. Oh man, Raven, the Black Raven tribe of the Uthgard are awesome. Freaky dudes who ride giant ravens. And they're they're isolationist and they're very aggressive. Wonder why R.A. made Maliki Driss patron deity and not Illustrae. Maybe he just didn't know about Illustrae, because Illustrae would be restricted knowledge in Drow society, maybe. I don't know. It's a good question. Aw, thank you. Yeah, planets in Farscape. Farscape was a galaxy. I like the idea of living ships. What do wizards call spell slots? I don't know. They've probably got, like, it would be related to the names of the wizards who uncovered certain things or parts or whatever. So they may call it like a layer or an iteration or a extension or a mantra or a karmic state or something like that. It'll be a mental slot that they've got a name for, almost like a chakra of the mind sort of thing. Who knows? Anyway, that's it from me, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'll be back again next weekend. If I am actually having a live stream before then, yeah. I mean, I'll be here doing the block party next weekend. So look for notifications of that in my community channel. And also on Mr. Rex will probably mention it if he's going to be taking part. I'm pretty sure he is. I hope he is. And obviously Ted from Nerd Immersion is going to be announcing it as well. You'll see lots of announcements from other YouTubers and people in the D&D community, the larger D&D hobby. Yeah, so that's going to be cool. And I will see you there.